Good morning. Today I am working on processing a Targhee lamb fleece that I dyed a few days ago. It's really fun over dyeing a naturally gray fleece because when sheep locks grow, they grow kind of like human hair does. They get blonde or bleached at the tips from the sunlight. So usually the base is much darker and then it's lighter at the tips. You over dye the whole fleece. Most of the color is in the tip and then it gets more dull as you get closer to the bottom of the lock. And I mean, the fleece is pretty multicolored to begin with. It was a very variegated gray overall. Like I have this piece here that's much darker and took less dye. This piece is much lighter, so it's much brighter. But it's just really cool color contrast. So the way I want to spin this is to preserve as much color contrast as possible. Now, generally speaking, when I'm processing a fleece from raw to yarn, there's a step after I wash it and after I dye it when I have to get it ready to spin. Now, this is a lamb fleece. It has a lot of vegetable matter. There's a lot of hair in it. I mean, not hair, a lot of hay in it. I could card it, but if I card it, two things will happen. The first is that my arm is going to get very sore and swollen, and I won't be able to do much afterwards because I have some shoulder issues. And the second is that all the colors will blend together and I'll lose all that lovely variegation. I don't have combs. Well, specifically, I don't have wool combs. They're like a long bar and then another wooden bar set this way, and they have nails sticking up. They look really dangerous, and generally speaking, depending on how you use them, they could be really dangerous. So at the moment, I don't own those. When I get another place, I'm hoping to invest time and money into combs and a drum carder. But frankly, neither of those is really what I want for this anyway, because that would still end up blending the colors. What I'm actually going to do today, I'm just going to use a normal hair comb. A metal one, like you would use for grooming a pet, is usually better. This is just the bamboo comb I use for when I'm weaving. I use it to beat. There we go. I use it for beating my weaving. But it does work fairly well for what I'm going to do today. So usually what I do when I have a dyed or even just a washed fleece that is a little on the VM-y side is I gather up all the tips in my hand for just like a handful, and I take the comb and I brush out the tips. This opens up the lock, and then most of the VM will fall out as I'm spinning it, which for the record is very messy. I always have to sweep up after because it gets everywhere. As you can see, I'm not losing the color variation. It's still fluffy looking. I'm not losing any of the best traits of this fleece. This is a very soft fleece. I mean, it's a lamb fleece. Targhee's soft generally to begin with. It's great stuff. I don't want to lose its best points by preparing it the wrong way. Now see that little handful? You still have all that color, but it's going to be way easier to spin. More, the VM will fall out, and some will still get into the singles, but then even more will fall out when I apply it. Probably all of it, or at least close. I don't remember ever really noticing VM in the finished yarn. It's just not really something I notice. So either most of it falls out or I'm just not really noticing. I'm going with most of it falls out because it sounds better. So this handful is pretty much ready. Sometimes if they're a little more compacted at the base, I'll fluff out the base as well, but these are pretty good. This is already quite fluffy. I pick out the larger pieces of VM and any like miscuts. What are those actually called? Second cuts? Yeah, second cuts. Where it's like little tiny bits that are much shorter than the rest. I pick those out. And I just get little handfuls of wool ready and spin from a handful. Some fleeces I don't even have to do this. If there's very little VM, I just spin it right from a handful of locks. The less I have to process it, the better. Not just because I don't like processing, because I don't, but it really does hurt my shoulder a lot. If trying to hand card a whole fleece will definitely make my bad shoulders swell up, and then I can't spin. And what's the fun of that? So I just take handfuls around the whole fleece, comb them up. I don't even necessarily have to do the whole fleece at one go. I can just spin enough for what, comb enough for when I'm spinning at this point, which is true of hand cards too, but the other points still stand. Yeah, nice and fluffy. I do find this particular fleece has a little bit of cotting at the edge of the locks, which is like micro felting. So probably the very end of each lock I'm going to pull out as I spin, so it's doesn't make little neps or anything. Not really a big deal. It's pretty common, especially for lambs, because they get into so much trouble to have a little bit of felting. Like, you can sort of see it, I think. Just a little bit there at the tips. It's not a big deal. And these are relatively long locks for a lamb fleece. Let's see. I actually have a built-in ruler thing on my desk so you can see stuff. So that's about, it's a little more than 4 inches. So that's pretty good. I mean, I've spun way shorter. I have a Jacob fleece I'm processing at the same time. That one's actually a U fleece, and I didn't dye it because it has such lovely black tones to it. And the locks, I think, are more like 3 inches, and it still spins really well. I mean, I can spin as short as 2 comfortably. Shorter than that, they start getting a little difficult. But yeah, you can, hoping that you can see why I picked this fleece in the first place. How crimpy it is. It's just so soft. It's gonna make really nice yarn. So that is how I'm processing it. And as I do different steps, I'll show you in little video clips. But I did also want to show you before the video is over. Those 3 yarns from the last video are done. When I went to soak them to finish the yarn, some of the dye started coming off the silk parts. So I ended up reheating them with more citric acid. Actually, it might have been white vinegar. It doesn't really matter. To reset the dye. So some of the color did like travel a little bit. So I'm glad I didn't really bother spinning them as a gradient because that would have been really depressing. But yeah, these are all done. They're really soft. I don't really know what I'm going to use them for yet. This one is 2 plies of the BFL silk and 1 ply just silk. I have the most yardage of this one, so if I weave with them, this one would probably end up being the warp, because, you know, I have the most of it. This one is the one where there's 2 plies of camel merino silk blend and 1 ply of just silk. It's much darker than the other 2, just because of the way the camel merino took the silk. Took the dye. And this one's the pure Polworth. As expected, it got really even softer after washing it, and I love the colors. It's a little brighter than the other 2, but since they're all in the same color family, once they're woven together, I guess I'll probably weave with them. The colors will work together a lot better. Usually when there's this much color variation, weaving would be my best bet. I could do many things with them. I can knit, I can crochet. I'm learning Tunisian crochet. I could even felt with them, although that's a massive waste. weaving probably makes the most sense. So as soon as I get that scarf off my 10-inch rigid heddle loom, that's probably what I'll go with. So warp, weft, and stripes. Probably. I could change the plans. I mean, I could also do like all of it as the warp and then a complementary yarn as the weft, or vice versa. I'd rather have them as the warp though, because then there's stripes them going this way and they all coordinate together better. I don't know. We'll see. I will show you what I do with it. Hope you all have a great weekend.